Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We are back for yet another update during this summer transfer window, helping me break down all things Spurs in the market. And man, I'm sure you get used to seeing his face across a lot of the Spurs social scene over this summer. We've got Kish over Brilliant White Labs joining us. Kish, lovely to have you here. How are you, bud? Unmute for us and tell us how you are.
Yeah, I'm great, man. I'm much better than I was feeling about Spurs yesterday after today's advancements. So yeah, I'm happy to dissect it and happy to be back on the show.
Kish, absolute pleasure to have you back alongside me. Look, on this edition of Last Word on Spurs, we will be discussing where Spurs are in terms of this summer transfer window. We know the club have opened direct talks with the Man City forward Savinho. We understand Spurs are at the moment in a position where those talks are ongoing. We'll be coming on to that and more. We also understand that interest in Eberechi Eze has reignited, and Spurs are very keen to see, along with Savinho, if they can also bring Eberechi Eze to the club this summer. And I think for what many would agree would be two absolute blockbuster deals if Tottenham were to get over the line, both Eberechi Eze and Savinho. And I think that would very much change a lot of people's thoughts on this summer transfer window so far. We also had confirmation that Mikey Moore has signed a new deal with Spurs. That is official. That is done. And he signed on his 18th birthday. Mikey Moore committing his long-term future to the club. As we are aware, of course, he is with Rangers on a season-long loan. There has also been an update from the camp of Nico Paz, who has personally left the door open in relation to a return to Real Madrid. We know Spurs have also been eyeing him as a potential number 10, and we understand Spurs' primary target between now and the end of this summer transfer window is the signing of Savinho, where it has been confirmed by Fabrizio Romano that Savinho has now become Tottenham Hotspur's first choice during this summer transfer window, and more importantly, a man that Thomas Frank is really wanting, really pushing to the Spurs hierarchy to get this deal done. So this appears to be the number one target for Thomas Frank. It appears to be Tottenham's number one target at the moment. And alongside that, as I mentioned, Eberechi Eze is still a player Tottenham have got a genuine interest in during this window. And he, according to Fabrizio Romano, is still on Tottenham's list. But let's start on that news about Savinho. If I bring Kishin back to the show, we understand Spurs have approached Man City over an unexpected attempt to sign Savinho. Savinho is the top target to replace Son. The feeling from sources in the industry is something around the 70 million euros could get this deal done. Savinho himself is quite keen on the move and feels under Thomas Frank he can become a regular starter at Spurs. Kish, give me your reaction to this news of Tottenham in talks for the player.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's just the kind of player that I love watching. He's the kind of player that will get you off your seat. He's still really young as well, which I think is obviously a major thing for the club. There's plenty of room for him to grow. But I think since he kind of broke through last season at Girona, putting up really good numbers there alongside really good performances, they had a sort of unexpected title charge in Liga. In the end, they just got Champions League football, but he was a major part of that. He's just the type of winger that most fans would love to watch. I think he's quick. His ability to beat a fullback 1v1 is really good, but his all-round play is also very good. So he's able to combine really well with his teammates when he cuts inside. He's also able to play on both sides, which I think is massive. I think nowadays you tend to get a winger who's very specific on which side they prefer, but Savinho, he has the capabilities of playing both sides, and he actually plays them quite differently. So if he's on the right flank, obviously he's a left footer. He's much more of a sort of creative player who wants to come inside to the sort of half spaces and create from more central areas, combined with other players in that area. And then on the left flank, I see him as more of a direct threat. So he's going to want to relentlessly run at his fullback, constantly get to the byline and put crosses in and cutbacks in. He's got a mix of real good speed, but then real good manipulation of the ball. So he's good in tight areas. He's good in open spaces as well, which I think as well, again, is another thing that I think not all wingers have. So some wingers are really good in tight spaces where there's lots of bodies and they can use that low center of gravity and agility to kind of weave in and out. But then there's some wingers who are good on the counter attack, and when there's open space, they can sort of explode into it and leave opponents behind. And I think Savinho has a mix of both, which is really good, because we know Thomas Frank is going to be adaptable in the way he plays. So there might be some games where, you know, we're sitting a bit more reserved, and then we want to kind of exploit the gaps on a counter attack. And Savinho is more than capable of doing that because his athleticism is really, really strong. But there's also games where we're going to be camped in the opposition half, where we're trying to break down a block and there's limited space available. I think Savinho is also really good in these situations. So I think he's a kind of winger you want to build around, just because of that flexibility, but also that real athleticism combined with the technique. I think there's a lot to like there.
Yeah, and I think from what we're seeing and from all suggestions, as has been reported now from multiple outlets, the key thing being is that this is a player that Thomas Frank seemingly really, really wants. And I think if that's the fact for the manager, you have to try and go all out to get him. Now, on the point of going all out to get him, as I've mentioned, there has been dialogue between the two clubs, and Spurs have discussed a package worth in the region of 50 million euros. However, Man City want a huge amount more than that if they are to part ways with the player. The player himself, we understand, is really, really keen on the move. And we understand that is because he wants to play every game and wants to feel important to a team. We're also hearing personal terms will not be an issue. And as I've mentioned already, Thomas Frank really wants this player. And Fabrizio Romano has said, I have a feeling this deal could get done. But this is the crucial element to this, Kish. City are saying they do not want to sell the player, and they have communicated that in response to the inquiry from Tottenham. Their perspective is that it would take a huge amount more than 50 million to consider his exit. How much, Kish, do you think we're talking to try and get this player out of City? Because I've seen a lot of the City fan pages, and I've seen a lot of negative reaction from them about the thought of losing this player. This hasn't gone down well. I think he played already 3 out of the 4 games at the Club World Cup for City as well. So clearly he does feel quite an integral part of what Pep Guardiola wants to do there. But I think the key has always been with Pep is that he doesn't ever want to stand in a player's way if he does want to go. So how critical will these talks be in these next 24, 48 hours to work out if they can get this deal done?
I think that's a massive point that you just made about Guardiola, and one that I was going to make is Guardiola never wants to have an unhappy squad. He really struggles with kind of managing unhappy players. And so I think he's always been big on kind of smaller squads. And I think recently he's kind of tried to build his squad a bit bigger because he's realized that it's necessary. But he's never been one to want unhappy players. And Savinho clearly wants to be a major part. I think at his age, he needs to be playing regular football. And I think he'll know that. He's in with big competition in the City ranks. I think they've got Oscar Bob, who's coming back from injury, who's a really talented player and plays in a similar position. And I think he's also seen as a bit of a gem of City's academy. They also obviously bought in Rayan Cherki, who I know is more of a central player, but can play out wide. Omar Mamouche can play out wide as well, and he's played central as well. And then they got Doku on the other side, and there's so many talented players there, and all of them are of a similar age bracket. So I think it's tough when you're that age, 21, and you're obviously at a major club, and that is a massive achievement for any player who gets to play for Man City. But there comes a point where you have to prioritize development over kind of that achievement. And I think he would be a smarter player to leave now and potentially get 4, 5, 6 years of proper week in, week out football. And then, you know, there's always the time later in your career if you want to go and kind of challenge for major trophies, whether that's at Spurs, whether that's elsewhere. That will be in the player's mind that right now the development is the key thing.
I think also, Kish, what's important to stress is that this is the player that has really built his name up at Girona, right? Last season, the season before last, where, you know, I think he was in the La Liga team of the. I think he was in the team of the season for Girona. Very, very impressive. He earned that move to Manchester City. Yes, I think a lot of people look at his stats for City last season. they weren't the greatest, if we're going to be honest. Just the 1 goal, 29 games itself, created a whole number of chances. But this is a player that, let's be very clear about it, Pep Guardiola has got a very much clear liking of, and a player that he did see being a huge part of Man City's future. As I've mentioned, has featured regularly so far in pre-season for them. It wasn't on their radar to sell the player. If you can maybe just give us a bit of background on his kind of progression up until earning that move to Man City, because I think that really should be fans' focus at the moment, rather than looking maybe back at the previous season, which again, let's be honest about it, no real City player did stand out. The work that he did really to gain that move to City is where he grabbed the attention of a lot of top clubs in Europe.
Yeah, I think that's a major point. I think obviously with age, you tend to develop. So him having an even better season the season before tells you a lot. At 19, he was one of the best wingers in the world, not just in the Liga. I think we need to be really key on context with a Pep Guardiola winger. And it's hard to kind of visualize this without kind of a tactics board. But Pep Guardiola's wingers, they're there to create width. And those wingers are not there to score goals. They're there to create width for those number 8s or number 10s who want to crash the box and arrive in the box. The likes of, we've seen Gundogan do it so well, De Bruyne do it so well. Now they're looking at more Marmoush, and they've brought into Tahani Reinders, and then obviously as well, Haaland is the biggest box presence around. And so I think there's so much to say about Pep Guardiola's wingers. Their main priority is keeping the width. That's one, to allow the spaces in the central areas for midfielders to crash the box. And the other thing is to get to the byline and serve Haaland. And so Savinho's main role last season was pretty much stay on the touchline. When you get the ball, beat your fullback and serve Haaland or serve an on-rushing midfielder. And I think that is never going to be an environment that creates goals for a winger, because if you're that far away from goal all the time, if you're always hanging on the touchline because you're instructed to do that, you're not going to be scoring goals. The only real chance you might get to score goals is if the other winger has it and you attack the back post, that we've seen Brennan Johnson do so well over the last season. But I wouldn't look at those goals, and I think the output at Girona the season before is more reflective of the kind of player he is and his potential output. I believe he was something like 10 goals, 10 assists in that team at age 20, at a really competitive league as well. That this was a Spanish league with obviously Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid. It's not a non-top 5 league or anything like that. And to do that at 20 years old, I think is a real achievement. So I really wouldn't look into the numbers at Man City. I'd look at more footage and look at, okay, what positions are you picking up? What positions was he instructed to pick up? And okay, that makes sense why he didn't create that many goals. But let's look at his all-round play. What was he doing when he got the ball? How dangerous was he at getting to the byline? And also he was in and out of the team quite a bit, because Man City, they have that fortune to rotate really well. He was also rotated from left to right quite a lot, which I think in that system, I think he suits more of the left-sided role, but he played a lot more of the right, because obviously he's a left-footed player. And if he was on the touchline constantly, I think the left side suited him better, and he played a lot on the right. So I think there's a few factors to take into account with him. But for me, if you want to be told a story about Savinho, you just got to go and watch him, because the ability he has is so clear that that's scalable to higher output. And I think for me as well, I watched him and Doku live, one of the Man City games at White Hart Lane last season, and I was just amazed by both of them. And he was electric that day. So I think context is definitely key there.
He gave us trouble, Savinho, for those that do go back and watch the game at the Tottenham Stadium. He most certainly did. One thing I want to touch upon with you on it, Kish, is just how much of a difference is to the wingers that we have got. Obviously, there's been some interesting comparisons between Savio and Tel being one. And for those that are watching the show live, they can see there's a lot of green in relation to what Savio offers and compares to Matisse Tel. Obviously, we know goals-wise last season, it was, again, not the greatest for Savio. I can't get away from that. But, this is the player that is being bought potentially on the word potential. But again, you have to go back a season before that, what he did at Girona, that has already earned in that move to Man City. What difference does he offer us in terms of the variation of wingers that we've got, Kish, that stands him apart at the moment? Because some very interesting stats between him, Brennan Johnson, for example, in relation to just how different they are in terms of their ability to get on the ball, turn a player, break a low block. Is that the key fundamental difference between maybe what Savinho is going to be to the likes of, no disrespect, Brennan Johnson, Matisse Tell, that when we are playing teams at home that, as we know, down the years at the Tottenham Stadium are going to sit in, make life difficult for us. This is where you want to give the ball to Savinho, let him drive at those defences, open those spaces, and hopefully allow us to score plenty of goals, which, as we said yesterday, is an area we're struggling. We've lost 91 direct goal involvements from this team. Hopefully the signing of this player alleviates at least part of that problem.
Oh, 100%. I think for me, when I'm looking at building a squad as a team, I think you want different profiles, because different profiles allow you to approach different games accordingly. So I think it's actually a really nice blend of wingers that we're creating in this team, where we've got some that are really good at breaking low blocks in terms of that 1v1 ability. There's some that with a lot of development, I still think both Matisse Tell and Brennan Johnson have a way to go, but I think both of them have real goal scoring potential. And that is in certain situations. I think they need to always be close to goal, whereas Savinho and Kudus, they can affect the game in other ways. So in more of their all-round play, their ability to take on their fullback, to attract players towards them. I think people underestimate how much that does, is the ability to really attract opponents towards you. If you're a winger and you say, let's say someone comes and presses you, and then you beat that first player, it's only natural that the next defender is going to come, and that pulling out of the next defender, that's what creates gaps for other people to run into, and that's what creates openings to score goals. So I think that's a key point. This is not to say that one is better than the other either. I think Matisse Tell, Brennan Johnson have key parts to play this season because of their ability to score goals. And I know we haven't necessarily seen that in Tell, but I think the potential is certainly there with him. I like the way he can create shots out of nothing. His ball striking is really good. I think with players like him and Johnson, you want to get them as close to goal as possible, and you want to reduce their responsibilities in all-round play. So that's the kind of opposite wingers situation we have. And I think it's actually really nice that you can occasionally pair one with the other. So you kind of want a ball heavy, I guess, player on one side who's there to kind of attract opponents, beat fullbacks, etc. And then you want the other one on the other side who's there just to tap in at the back post or make runs into the box and stuff like that. And if you have that variance on both sides, I think that's a really nice dynamic to have.
It's going to be interesting to see if Tottenham can get this deal done. I think what's also interesting is it comes on a day where we understand Man City have been making inquiries for other players. So just to bring that to your attention out there, we understand City have now entered the race for Xavi Simons. We know Simons has been a player that Chelsea have been courting for a lot of the summer. Chelsea's biggest problem, like a lot of clubs out there, is there's a need to sell. They have to sell before they can buy, and that has delayed their attempt to try and get Xavi Simons over the line. And we understand that Spurs now, with that being the case, have maybe spotted an advantage in the market when they've gone for Savinho. They obviously know City have got a clear interest in Simons, and at this moment in time, this is what's key to really bring to the listeners and viewers, that a lot of reports are suggesting that Savinho has given Tottenham that green light. He wants to join the football club, and it is now waiting for the clubs to find an agreement. And according to sources in Brazil, these conversations started as early as last week. And the projection between the two parties that this will not become a soap opera. It will either be a yes or a no. This isn't going to drag. Tottenham have made their intention to City that they are willing to pay over the value of what City maybe were expecting for the player. And as I've mentioned at the start of this show, Man City want way more than the 50 million that Spurs inquired for the player. You may be looking at an upwards fee of 70 million, 80 million euros. And what we do understand is that Tottenham, even despite if they do sign Savinho, they also want to sign a genuine number 10 before this window comes to a close. There's been suggestions, Kish, that this would allow maybe Mohamed Kudus to play that number 10 role. Is that something you would be in favour of? Do you think that works as a slight alternative for now? I mean, we'll come on to where we are with Eze in a second, but just how much does the signing of Savinho give us a lot more options straight away than what we have at the moment?
Oh, certainly, it's for sure an option. I think Savinho, his flexibility to play on both wings also massively helps. With Kudus, I really like him in central areas because it's really rare that you get a player who can dribble through central areas. It's so congested in there. There's so little space. For someone to be able to kind of weave in and out of challenges in a real powerful way is so effective, and it can really be a game-breaking kind of attribute. I think the issue with Kudus is his passing ability isn't at a top level. So when we are facing, let's say, Burnley at home this weekend, that's not the kind of 10 I would want there. I'd want someone who can really open the lock and find those like intricate, cute passes between small gaps. I don't think that's Kudus, but where Kudus could really thrive as a number 10 is in more transitional games where we can really break on the opposition, and where his kind of ability to powerfully carry through the thirds is so effective. So I think that's definitely an option with Kudus. And I'd kind of compare him as a number 10-ish to a sort of Morgan Rogers type player. And we've seen how effective he's been in especially big games where those spaces are there to really carry. So I think that's definitely one to watch with Kudus. But I still would like that number 10, especially someone who can be a pass first player. I think we're building an attack that's very dribble heavy, lacking probably, I think a lot of them have a way to go with that output, and I think that output will improve, but we haven't got someone to kind of serve them. With Maddison being out, I think we want someone who has that bit of IQ, that bit of vision to really unlock our exciting wingers in possession. So someone who can kind of really receive the ball under pressure and create things out of nothing, and the David Silva types, those sorts of players who are really going to help us in unlocking that exciting attack that we have. So I would be big on us going for a number 10 as well as this deal, despite the fact that I think Kudus can certainly play number 10 in certain games. I think this, for me, relieves the pressure of that number 10 signing for me, because I think that number 10 signing has to be good at a lesser skill set. So not a lesser skill set, but less amount of skills. So that number 10 can be someone who's there mainly to break low blocks and to really unpick defenses. And maybe in bigger games, you might have Kudus there where he can lean on his running power and his ability on the counter-attack. And therefore, we're not trying to look for the perfect player in this number 10 signing, because we now have a bit more flexibility there. So I think that's definitely something to note with that 10 signing.
I think just on the point of Savinho, I think we do, as fans, I think we look at that player and think we want someone with experience that can hit the ground running. I have to ask you about the fact that last season, Kish, just the one goal in 29 league appearances, we know how much the versatility will appeal to Frank by having somebody that can operate on both the left and the right wings. But how much pressure does immediately go on to the player, given how much Spurs do need that real creative spark in the team? Does that put this player under an immense pressure before he gets going? Because to be fair, at City, he's one of many, many options there. He's not had to become the main man where it feels at Tottenham. As soon as he comes through the door, with the price tag, if we're led to believe what that price tag might be, could be upwards of 70 million. Is he going to be under immediate pressure from day one to deliver the product, given, again, last season, not getting away from it, just the one goal in 29 appearances? How much will that be on the player? How much will a player to deal with that element of pressure?
I think that's definitely a point worth discussing. I think the way that I take to Savinho is that he's someone who just enjoys his football. He's someone that even in the biggest stage after joining Manchester City, he's doing things that he's clearly enjoying his football. He's clearly one of those players who just loves to be out there and kind of demonstrate his skills. And Pep doesn't necessarily trust players like that unless they're going to do the business as well. And I think that's a massive part to add. I think with him and Kudus both being kind of marquee-ish signings, I think that relieves a bit of the pressure as well. But there's always those risks there, and obviously we can't be inside the dressing room to know what kind of people these signings are. But going back on kind of Frank's ability to really maximize attackers, and that's been regimented now in all the years that he's been in the Premier League. You've seen attackers come to him with kind of limited no one really knowing, is what I mean. So Mbeumo came from the second division of France. Wissa came from the second division of France. Ivan Toney came from Peterborough, and he turned them into real output machines. And Frank knows what he wants from his attackers, and he always has, and he's always backed himself to maximize that output. And I think it's quite interesting as well, and actually quite promising for me that the type of attackers he's targeting at Spurs.
Yeah.
I think at Brentford, he was clearly targeting attackers that worked in a sort of more counter-attacking system. And it's clear that he realizes at Spurs that you need more than that, because you're not going to have that space to kind of exploit counter-attacks. And I'm happy that he hasn't kind of just thought, oh, let's go get Mbeumo and let's go get players that suited me before, because we're not going to face the same challenges that Brentford faced. We're going to face completely different opposition, completely different types of games. And Savinho and Kudus show that he's kind of realized that and he's willing to adapt. So I think all of those factors make me more confident about the settling in period. But you can never see how these things will work out.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, what we do know is from a lot of the sources later in this, at the evening at the moment, is that City are pushing for a very high fee in the region, as I've mentioned already on the show, between 60 to 70 million if they are to sell the player. And a reminder, Spurs are expected still to sign a number 10 this window. We do know there was genuine interest in this last week to also sign another centre-back. It'll be interesting to see if those targets are still in play, if Spurs do get Savinho over the line, because this is going to be, you'd imagine, a huge bulk of their transfer budget. But we do know, following obviously that foul move from Morgan Gibbs-White, that there was 60 million allegedly burning away, because that was the reported release clause for Morgan Gibbs-White. So it is something to keep an eye on. City are also understood from their perspective to be eyeing other positions I've already mentioned. They are looking for alternatives. They like Xavi Simons. We understand Chelsea have shown a genuine interest there, but that deal at the moment for Chelsea is difficult to do because they do need to get players out of the football club. There have also been suggestions that Rodrigo is a genuine Man City target now, with Grealish gone. Grealish is joining Everton on a season-long loan. McAtee, who we discussed in our previous episode, McAtee is expected to be a Nottingham Forest player. That is pretty much a done deal. That will be confirmed. If it isn't already by the time the show goes out, that will be confirmed in the next 24 hours. And it leaves City in a position where they are going to have some money to have available. And Guardiola is a big, big fan of Rodrigo and sees him as a player that is more advanced than what Savinho is right now. I mean, how much do you think, Kish, before we do talk about Eze in a second, how much would Pep be gutted to lose Savinho? Because he's a player that he has invested some time in, right? He's played, as I mentioned, 3 of the 4 games so far on the Club World Cup. What will be the genuine feeling for him to lose his player? Because he does seem to be someone that he's, as I've mentioned, invested time in. City fans have also taken a liking to the player. There was a feeling that really this season coming was going to be his season.
Yeah, I think it actually goes a bit under the radar how much Pep enjoys developing players. I think people often kind of give him the title of he just spends loads of money, but I think Pep throughout his career has taken players from good to world class, and I think he always backs himself to do that. And I think clearly he saw something very promising in Savinho. I think he sees the same with Doku. I think what's actually kind of affected it here is that the Premier League is so strong now that Pep realizes that the margins are so small, and sometimes that bit of kind of leeway you might give a younger player, you can't afford to maybe do that in this current Premier League at least. And the way that Liverpool have gone out and spent, the way that Chelsea are going out and spending, I think he's probably realized that if Savinho is kind of wanting minutes every week, that Rodrigo is a kind of guaranteed upgrade because Rodrigo's older. He's done it at Real Madrid for year in, year out. I think Rodrigo is a legitimate world-class player. So I don't, that doesn't surprise me, especially the kind of the way the league's going. I think you have to keep up with your competition, and even Pep, who backs himself to develop these young players, I think would probably realize that now and probably opt for Rodrigo over Savinho. One thing I would also add is that we know Arsenal have been after a left winger, and if this kind of Savinho, us buying Savinho, can help out taking Rodrigo away from them and the potential for them signing Rodrigo, that's a nice little bonus as well. So I think that's one thing to note as well.
Amen. Look, we shall see if Spurs do get the player over the line, but as things stand, all is in play. The key thing we have to take away from this is that Savinho really, really wants to join Tottenham. And I think that's been a great thing to see this summer so far. We've seen the way that Kudus really wanted to come to the football club, the way Polina really wanted the Spurs move. But in fact, it does appear Tottenham have got a clear focus on bringing in proven Premier League talent. Again, you might argue Savinho maybe he's not proven Premier League, but he has got Premier League experience. He's a player that the key thing about this is Thomas Frank really, really wants. And as Kish said already, he's got a track record of developing players throughout his time at Brentford in very similar positions. And I think if this is the player that Frank wants, Tottenham have to try and move heaven and earth to keep him. Look, we're halfway through the show, and we have got over nearly 8,500 that are watching the show live. Thank you ever so much for your incredible support from Last Word on Spurs. I'm joined by Kish over at Lily White Lab. You can find them, of course, on Twitter. They are also, of course, on YouTube as well. Kish has done a really, really good breakdown on the real benefits that Savinho would bring to Spurs. We urge you to go and check that out. That will be in our description. And look, if you're liking these one-to-one shows, we'll be doing a lot of these throughout the late part of the transfer window where hopefully a lot of news will be breaking. We can urge, if you can, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this out to a worldwide Spurs audience. And next, we're going to come to a player that we know, I think, look, there's not many players that really unite the fan base and get them off their seat. But whenever the name Eberechi Eze is mentioned, it's a player that it feels the majority of Tottenham fans would love to see him in a Spurs shirt. So where are we on Eberechi Eze? Where do we stand? Well, we understand Spurs, as things stand, may still bid for Eberechi Eze. Now, there has been a number of suggestions throughout the last 24 hours in the Spurs social media space that not only are Spurs considering challenging Arsenal for Eze alongside Savinho, Spurs are working in the background for a deal for the player. And there are even suggestions that Thomas Frank has already given the seal of approval to Eberechi Eze and has even gone as far as already meeting Eze behind the scenes, allegedly. These are reports that are being, at the moment, pumped around Spurs social media. Look, it's hard to give any real validity to these stories at the moment. But what we do know is that Eze is on Spurs' list. Fabrizio Romano has confirmed that he was always on Tottenham's list. And for sure at the moment, he remains an interest. Now, we brought this in our previous show to you, that Arsenal at the moment are understood to be focused on outgoings right now. That's their primary focus. And that is why Tottenham, from what we understand, have potentially returned to the table, the negotiation table with Crystal Palace to try and get this deal done. And you'd also argue the fact that Palace, the confirmation has now come through from UEFA. They have been demoted to the Conference League. That would increase the chances of Eberechi Eze leaving Palace. And we understand Spurs being keen on his signature. Kish, we know the world moves fast in the transfer market. Eberechi Eze, you've never hidden away your pleasure or delight of seeing him in a Spurs shirt. We know you've done a lot of videos on him as well, so make sure you check that out. Can you see this being finally the window, Kish, that Eberechi Eze becomes a Tottenham player?
Yeah, this is a weird one because I can't remember a summer in the last 5 or maybe even 6 years where we haven't been linked to Eze at least once. It's clear the club have watched him since he was at QPR. I think first thing to say is just as a player, there's no football fan who wouldn't enjoy watching Eze play. I think that's guaranteed. I think the other thing to note is, for me as a person, Sonny was kind of everything I loved about Spurs and that modern era of Spurs, and his kind of infectious personality and real just a good person to kind of have at the face of your club. And I really think Eze fits that. He's someone who's out there doing good work behind the scenes, etc., etc. He comes across really, really well. So I think that's one thing I just wanted to add. In terms of a footballer, he is just a joy to watch. The ball's stuck to his feet, the way he twists and turns and kind of drops shoulders so easily to put defenders off balance. He's a very interesting one because I think at the start of the window, it would have been a no-brainer for me. I think the way that we're shaping the squad at the moment is very, very dribble heavy. And I can't picture an attack where you have Eze, Savinho, and Kudus. I mean, that would be so good to watch. But I'm just trying to work out how that kind of all lays out together. And for me, I'm a football purist kind of fan. So I would adore to watch all three of those players on the same pitch. I'm just trying to work out how it all fits. And like I said earlier, I think that number 10 really needs to be someone with an eye for a pass. If I was kind of building that team, I think Eze is a good passer. He's got good vision. I think he certainly is a dribble first kind of player. And so that's my only real reservation with the deal. I mean, there's no way I would be upset with Eze joining the club. But I just do have some reservations, mainly that if the club are happy with it and are going with it, there must be a plan there. But I'm just trying to work out what that plan is in terms of having three incredible dribblers in one team without a kind of real player to serve them, I guess. So that will be my only real concern around the deal. But if the club are signing it off, then they clearly have a plan for it.
Yeah, I think the key thing here, Kish, is that we're just not used to Spurs targeting proven Premier League players. I think we've been so used to down the years, Spurs bringing in youth prospects with the hope that in 1 or 2 years' time, these guys are going to flourish and then maybe sell them on for, again, a decent fee and then again look to bring in youth players. We've been very, let's be honest about it, unused to Spurs going to buy in proven talented players that go in and elevate the first team. But there's no doubt is that Eberechi Eze walks into Tottenham's team. He struts into Tottenham's team, and I think suddenly Spurs become a lot more fearful on the eye if you have got Eberechi Eze in the team, if you have got Savinho in the team, and if you have got Kudus in the team. Suddenly, I know you're saying there's a lot of dribble-heavy players there, but suddenly this team looks scary on attack. This team looks scary on transitions, right?
100%. 100%. And I also think we've also forgotten what squad depth looks like, or have we ever really known what squad depth looks like? And those are really talented players, but there's a lot of fixtures to be played this season, and we need cover all over the place. And it's not going to be all, if they did all sign, it wouldn't be all three of them playing every single game. I think there's games where it would suit two of them, and games where it might be even suit one of them. And I think that's a major point as well. I think fans often have this kind of visualization of first, this is our first choice 11, but it's really rare that you get kind of more than 5 or 10 fixtures a season where your first 11 plays. So I think that's a major point to add as well. And I think if we're really willing to kind of go out and make these kind of statement signings, then they can't just stop at Eze because he's going to boost the kind of fan morale, or Savinho because we need to replace Son. I think we need to get this proven quality in all kinds of areas that we need going forward. And at the moment, I think the priority is number 10, but maybe in 6 months, 1 year time, it might be somewhere else. And I think that is the kind of signing that you have to make in the summer. And I also want us to continue to sign the young prospects as well, because having the blend of both is the perfect way you build a successful club. All the most successful clubs in the world, they do both. Even Real Madrid, Barcelona, they're constantly hoovering up young talent while they're also buying players for the first team. And I think that's the best recipe for success at the top level of football.
Agree. Now, look, for listeners on audio, obviously it's a fluent transfer window, so things are always moving. We have had some news that has come to us in the last few minutes here that Tottenham are expected to be returning to the table for an improved bid for Savinho. It is expected that the offer that Tottenham is going to submit to Man City is going to be in the region of 60 million. And that will once again bring City back to the negotiation table and consider selling the Brazilian. We understand, as I mentioned earlier in the show, when Tottenham initially put in their inquiry of 50 million, that was not enough to get Man City really talking about the deal. Spurs have had to go away. They've had to look at their finances. They've had to come back and see what they can muster up. And what we understand Spurs are mustering up is a bid in the region of 60 million that will bring City to the table to at least start the negotiations. And I think the key thing about this, as we said earlier, the player wants Tottenham. Thomas Frank wants the player. That part of the puzzle is already, it feels sorted. The puzzle that Spurs have got to complete with City is a negotiation on the fee. And that feels really what is going to be, at the moment, the big drawback as to how this deal does get done, because it is going to be quite a significant fee. Spurs, as we mentioned before, do still want a number 10, as Kish has touched upon. There have been suggestions that Tottenham are also looking at a centre-back in this window. And again, that is still not going to be going away. We're going to come to Vušković in a second and where his future does lie, because that looks like he's going to lie away from the club. But a question to ask you, back on Eze for a second, Kish, is the fact that it does feel throughout this summer that Arsenal has very much been Eberechi Eze's first choice. By the fact Arsenal, if they're no longer in the negotiation and have stepped away, how confident are you Tottenham will get this deal done and the player won't hold out to later in the window for Arsenal potentially to return to the negotiation table?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It's hard to know where Arsenal's recruitment plans lie at the moment. I'm pretty sure they need to sell before they buy now. I'm pretty sure. It's interesting because it feels like Arsenal would have gone for Eze before they went for Madueke. So I think that's certainly a factor. It feels like they prioritized that before they prioritized Eze. I think he'll probably want to get his future wrapped up sooner rather than later. But if he's got any inkling that Arsenal is still involved, I'm sure he'll want to delay and see where his options are. I think it's also a bit of a myth that he's an Arsenal fan. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think he was at Arsenal Academy as a youngster, where he was released, and then at many other clubs. I'm pretty sure he's from West London, so I doubt he's an Arsenal fan. And also, I think those things get really overstated in terms of footballers. Footballers are there to have a successful career, and they'll make their choice on their best kind of development path rather than previous kind of allegiances. So I think that needs to be downplayed a bit. But obviously, Arsenal are probably the more attractive option if he's guaranteed minutes. But if he's not necessarily guaranteed minutes there, then I think Spurs is kind of the next drop down at the moment. And I do think the kind of way that the club could sell it to him is as being kind of the face of the project with Son kind of moving out. There is that kind of open space there for someone to become that kind of talisman. And the fact that he is kind of an English player really helps him there because he'll understand what the club's like. He can speak well in interviews, and I think that always helps when English is your first language. So I think those factors are massive, but it's hard to say because we'll see where Arsenal's kind of recruitment lies.
Yep. What's also a key potential ally for us in this is that Justin Cochrane, who obviously is part of the new coaching staff set up at Tottenham with Thomas Frank, is understood to hold quite a close relationship with Eberechi Eze. So how much that does help and work in Tottenham's favour, we shall see. But it could be, again, another key part in this whole puzzle as to how if that helps Tottenham get Eberechi Eze over the line and be a Spurs player. He's a modern hybrid playmaker. He operates centrally between those lines, stretches play from the left, drops to initiate moves as well. Such a unique skill set. It feels this season, Kish, with the players like an Eberechi Eze, a Savinho, a Kudus. We're going to get a lot of teams that are maybe going to come to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They're going to sit there, and as you've already said already, in a low block, and we're going to break these teams down. And it feels the players that Spurs are targeting are players that are very much going to be able to help break those low blocks, Kish.
I think that's a major point. I think that's something that I had concerns around Frank coming in. I think I was a big fan of Frank, but my main kind of concern with him is that he's rarely ever faced low blocks because he's always been at the underdog side. You as a Brentford manager, you barely ever get teams coming in and putting 11 men behind the ball. So I think that was a concern. It's clear that he's kind of adapting to that and realizing that. I think a major part of that kind of strategy of breaking a low block and having those dribblers to really attract players and stretch play is you need to also make sure that players crash the box and arrive in the box, because there's no point in getting to the byline if you haven't got numbers in the box. And these teams that sit in low blocks often have two massive centre backs who will head everything away, and you really need to put them under pressure and ask questions. And I think that will probably come obviously from Solanke being in the box, but I think we'll see midfielders also making late runs into the box. And I think Pape Sarr is a great example of someone I think could get 5 to 10 goals in all competitions by doing that. I think he's got good timing and arriving in the box. I think we've seen that on some occasions, but I think there's a level to go up there. I think Bentancur showed that at times as well. Bergvall as well. I think we've got some potential players who can time their runs really well and are pretty big units as well, so can compete in the air, win second balls and stuff like that. I think that's a major part of breaking low blocks. It's not just having those dribblers, it's also being able to compete in the box because there's such a crowded area in there. So you want players to challenge constantly, and that's what also tires those centre backs out. They're constantly getting challenged and barged in the air and those kind of things. That's what leads to tired bodies and tired minds, and that's when mistakes happen and we can get that kind of all-important goal.
Yeah, I do agree. Look, we shall see if Tottenham can get Eberechi Eze over the line. By all accounts, it does feel that this move feels like it's coming back on, which again is dangerous words to say. I know many will be holding their breath to see how these next 24, 48 hours do play out, because I know there has been so many false dawns with Spurs over this last few weeks. I mean, we saw it when Tottenham did go in the market to try and get, of course, Morgan Gibbs-White, and how it felt for 24, 48 hours, everything was changing at Tottenham. There was talk of sponsorship money coming in, financial injection in terms of investment coming in. That has all appeared to go quiet. But again, in typical Tottenham fashion, in this last 24 hours, we've had, of course, the news that Spurs are trying to get a deal done for Savinho. We are also hearing Spurs will try, if they can, to bring Eberechi Eze to the club, and they're not finished there yet. Look, we're going to go for our next break of the show. For our listeners on audio, we have got nearly over 10,500 of you that are watching this show live. Thank you ever so much for incredible support for Last One on Spurs. If we can, and if you do like this content, we ask you to please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for us. Keep sharing this out to the worldwide Spurs community. I'm joined by Kish over at the White Labs. They are just getting going on their YouTube journey. Please make sure you give them a like and a subscribe. Kish will be keeping you in and posted with a lot of the players Spurs are linked with during the transfer window. A lot of player breakdowns over there. A lot of comparisons between the players that we've got to the players that might be coming in. So that account is really, really worth it in terms of making sure you're on the ball with who Tottenham are being linked with and if they can improve the side. We're going to go to quickly some news, Kish. Some good news that has come in, and that's Mikey Moore has signed a new contract with the club. Turns 18 at the time I was recording this. Currently on loan at Rangers for the 25-26 campaign. But it's a new deal, and I think many may breathe a sigh of relief, Kish. I know there was some maybe concern that maybe on the back of last season, not getting a huge amount of games, having to go out on loan, that maybe there's a worry about his future. But he's locked down now for what we understand to be on a long-term deal, Kish.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that this was part of the requirements of him signing a new deal, was that they would find him a loan. And I really respect that from his camp, because I think it's very easy to stay in a kind of settled environment where you've grown up your whole life and you are seen as kind of the young talent. But I think even when you're that highly rated within the club, you need to get those first team minutes, and you need them week in, week out. And I think in Mikey Moore's case, I think that's especially true. I think he was way too good for youth football, but I think he did struggle when he came into a first team environment, and that's to be expected. I think also everyone's kind of development is different. So you see players of Mikey Moore's age who have hit the ground running when they've gone to first team environments, but that's not the case. That's not to say that Mikey Moore won't do that at a later date. I think everyone's kind of development is different, both physically and kind of mentally. With Mikey Moore, I think he has to get used to the kind of intensity of men's football. I think we saw some really bright sparks, but he faded in and out of games. And I think that's just because the step up is so big physically and intensity wise. I see Mikey Moore's future lying more centrally. I think he kind of came in as a wide player, but I think when I watch him, I think he lacks a bit of explosivity on the touchline, but I think he's really good at kind of combining and creating from central areas, and he's really good at kind of striking from range as well. And you want players like Mikey Moore to have a lot of touches of the ball, because they're the type of players that the more they feel the ball throughout the game, the more they kind of feel in rhythm and start to really create stuff. And I think that's massive for a player like him. So I really hope that at Rangers, he gets some minutes kind of in central areas. It doesn't mean that he has to start as a number 10, but if he's on the flank, is he allowed to kind of have that freedom to drift inside? But also kind of just getting used to the intensity of men's football. And I think people like kind of Lamine Yamal and Ethan Nwaneri and these kind of players who have broken through at such young ages have kind of clouded people's view of what development looks like. I think some players kind of develop much quicker than others, physically especially, and some don't. And I think development is never going to be linear. You hit your peak at different stages.
Yeah.
There's players that haven't even hit their peak by 27 and then suddenly explode at 28, 29. So I think it's a long game with people like Mikey Moore. And I think that all we can kind of hope for is that he continually grows, continually gets minutes, and those minutes go up and up and up, and the level goes up and up and up, and then hopefully kind of he's ready to be a major part.
Yeah, agree. I think you could argue at the moment he's in actually a tougher environment there than he was at Spurs. Rangers, of course, starting off with a couple of draws. They've been better in the European stage, but yeah, not an easy time at Rangers for new manager Russell Martin. I'm sure we'll all be keeping a close eye on Mikey's progress there. We wish him all the very, very best. We have had a form of an update in the Nico Paz debate. I know there's some out there that would love to see Nico Paz come to the football club. A Argentinian wizard, he's been called. You know, a very, very intelligent player, a player that does appear to have a big, big opportunity to take the European scene by storm. Kish, will come to you on this point. We understand that he was questioned about maybe returning to Real Madrid, where a reminder for you, Real Madrid have a buyback clause in Paz's current contract that allows him to go back to the club for the next 2 to 3 years. He was asked, returning to Real Madrid, you never know. I'm focused on Como, which is where I have to be. I have no idea about my future. I don't even know what I'll do tomorrow. So he seems to be leaving everything open at the moment, Kish. You know, not committing to Real Madrid. You could argue it might be leaving an open door to Tottenham as well. How much, Kish, do you think this kind of player, we spoke about it last night, could really benefit Spurs? And in an environment, and again, an age where there's just so much potential for this young kid, right?
This is like, for me, the dream option at number 10 on the market. I think he ticks every box that I would look for. The ability to come and help progress ball in deeper areas, but also create in the final third. A real good eye for a pass, real good ball striking ability from outside the box, the ability to arrive in the box. He's a really complete player, and he's only 20, 21. So I think he's the dream player, and there's a reason that Real Madrid obviously have those clauses on his contract, because they see the potential, and he clearly believes in his own potential, that he's kind of flirting with that move a little bit. I don't see this one as that realistic, just because of that Real Madrid link. And these kind of South American players, as I've said before, they always have kind of a longing to join Real Madrid or Barcelona. That's kind of what they grow up dreaming of. And if that option's there, you always expect them to kind of play to that and really aim for that. But in terms of a player, I think he's ridiculously good. You only need to watch him for 90 minutes to understand the kind of potential we're talking about here. A really typical Argentinian 10, to be honest.
Yeah, and we know from the fact Spurs loving their RGs of the past, the likes, of course, of Ricky Villa, Osvaldo Ardiles, some would say Eric Lamela. I loved Eric Lamela's time at the club. I know it wasn't for everyone. There's a talented player in there, and I think you maybe argue that maybe he's a little bit of more of a cheaper option than what an Eberechi Eze would be. And you see other options that are obviously going out now, and that number 10 list, you know, Kish, that is starting now to shrink. We have to be able to say that, because we've seen, as I mentioned earlier in the show, James McAtee, he's off to Nottingham Forest. You know, it feels that, do you agree, Kish, that kind of market of those number 10s is shrinking day by day, and Spurs are going to have to make some form of a decision. And maybe that's why they do go for someone like Savinho, because he does give you that opportunity, like you said earlier in the show, to then move Kudus into a number 10 role, and maybe look at this later in the window when there isn't, as you said, that amount of pressure to do it right now and see what the other options are left, right?
I think that's a great point. I think that's potentially what they'll do. I think Savinho relieves the pressure of the immediate, because there's potential cover in Kudus, and even Odobert is experienced in playing number 10 in certain situations. So I think this really buys Spurs a bit of time. And I think that probably scares fans, because buying Spurs time never always kind of ends up with us buying a player. But I think that's actually the right decision for now, because I think there will be a bit of movement, and there are a few number 10s that seem to be waiting around for a potential move. And I think you look at Harvey Elliott, you look at El Canous at Leicester, you look at Nico Paz, clearly, Eze as well. So there's kind of four options there who seem to kind of potentially want out or are open to a move. And they're kind of seem to be buying their time a little bit with the options. So I think it makes sense to delay this one slightly and see where the movement happens. Obviously, the club will have their first choice, but I think it's dependent on whether they can get that deal done, and then if not, then they go to the next one, etc., etc. So I expect that the number 10 deal to probably drag on if we can get the Savinho deal done quicker.
Yeah, listen, we will have to see how it does pan out. I think one thing we will just bring you is Kish just mentioned about El Kanous. There has been an update in relation to him. We understand that Newcastle United are showing strong interest in El Kanous. Obviously, Newcastle haven't had the easiest window to date. We know they've been rejected, it feels like, by everybody so far. But at the same time, we know they're close on a deal for Wissa. Isaac's future is up in the air. They will be busy, you feel, in the last few weeks of the window. And El Kanous, we understand, is on their radar. One man that we know Spurs have had, a real good journey with so far. He had a great start in pre-season, of course, with that friendly goal, was, of course, Vušković. And it does appear, as things stand, Kish, coming over to you, that Spurs are going to green light this exit to Hamburg. And now, from what we understand, the club is just waiting for Spurs to give their approval to the move. And we can also tell you that Luka Vušković is not part of Thomas Frank's 22-man squad for the Super Cup final. Almost again, kind of re-emphasising the fact probably is going to head out on loan. What's your feeling on that for you, Kish? I know in a lot of the Spurs fans out there, they may be a little bit disappointed that he isn't going to be hanging around and isn't going to get an opportunity. Your gut feeling on that for you from what you've seen of him so far in a Tottenham shirt?
I'm actually kind of happy that the club is starting to take development a bit more seriously. And I think we've seen previously where players have been in that kind of awkward phase where they're too good for youth football, but they're not quite good enough for the first team, and they end up kind of hanging around on the outer skirts of the first team, and that just stunts development. So I think while Vušković is an insane talent and has a genuinely incredible ceiling, and has been tipped to be that since he was 15, 16, like this guy's name has been around for a while, even though he's so young. I think, to be honest, if we take kind of the immediate hats off and think long-term future for both him and Spurs, I think it makes sense to get him as much game time as possible. And I think the loans that we've planned out for him have actually been really good, because each time it's been a step up. So it started with the loan to obviously his club in Croatia, then it was a team in Poland, and then we went to Belgium, which was a step up, and now it's a German loan, which is again a step up. And that is really smart kind of loan strategy that we haven't really seen from Spurs in recent years. So I think, to be honest, overall it's a positive. I think he could easily have had an impact this season, but it's dependent on injuries, and we don't know if those injuries will ever come. And then you're looking at a kind of wasted season for someone that good who's really ready to play men's football, but obviously not quite at the level of Romero and Van de Ven. So for me, it's a smart move. While it is probably a little bit disappointing because we're also excited about him, I think it's probably the smart move. Yeah.
Listen, we shall see. We've also got confirmation that Donnarumma is not part of the PSG squad for the Super Cup final. As I mentioned, Dane Scarlett is the other name that is not part of that squad. The good news is that Dominic Solanke is included in that squad for the Super Cup final, as is Destiny Udogie, two players that we know have been suffering from injury, but are both included in that squad. I want to ask you finally, Kish, with regards to Thomas Frank, because there's been some interesting quotes that have come out over the last 24 hours that I know for some fans have given them some degree of concern. He, from his perspective, whilst we understand centre-back is a target for Tottenham, he says that he sees Ben Davies being a very important player for the club. He says, I think we have enough fullbacks. Right now we have Ben and Jed. Jed was very good against Saka when we played Arsenal. He was very impressed with him. I think Ben is a very important player for the team. I think he has leadership qualities. His character and the way he understands the bigger picture is so important to this club. Everyone has got an ego, but his ego is not too big, and that's good. So you understand how much you need to help the team and the younger players. He understands when it's better for the club, and in all the actions, he's a player that will speak up. He's just a good guy, and it makes sense when you see him. That respect is there for his teammates. Some win by being respectful and also by being a top player. Ben is still, by the way, a very good player. So when you do the other things, you even win more respect. Now, I know some people will see this, Kish, as a concern that we're in 2025 and Ben Davies, bless him, I think has been a wonderful role model for the club, is being seen as a very important player. Does that worry you, Kish, that we've heard that come out?
I think it depends in what he means by those comments. Is he going to have meaningful minutes, or is he really valued in the club and around the club? I think what the issue and the difficulty we have is that we've built a very, very young squad, and our better players are on the kind of under 27, under 26 often, and so I think it's difficult because as fans we're not in and around the club every day. All we get to see is kind of the news that comes out and the matches themselves. And so I think what often goes under the radar is how much actually goes into each game, each training session, and you need characters around the place. I think obviously ideally you have top players and top characters. I think the way we've built the squad has a bit of an issue where our older players aren't necessarily our best players, which is kind of what we want to have in a squad, because you kind of, the way you build a squad is you get young players who are talented, and then hopefully they grow into kind of 27, 28-year-olds who are top players. But the way we've built it is kind of in reverse, where we had a more let's buy now for Conte, and we bought the likes of Richarlison, Bissouma, Højbjerg, and then we kind of changed strategy and we went for these really young and talented players. And obviously they kind of outgrew the older players in terms of ability, but obviously in terms of leadership quality and stuff, we're still lacking there. I think obviously we've got rid of Son this summer as well, which is a major impact on the club itself. And I think the other thing I want to add is that a new manager coming into the place, they need kind of not like a mouthpiece, but a kind of connection to the club and someone who's been there, kind of seen what's happened, what's gone well in the last few years, what's gone wrong. And I think probably Frank sees Ben Davies a bit as something like that. Do I want to see him play meaningful minutes this season? I really don't. Like I really think we're above his level now, and I think his physical decline has actually been more prominent in the last 6 months, I think. But do I have any issue with him being around the place? Not at all. If it comes to a point where we're relying on Ben Davies to play because we've got Udogie out or whatever, then no, I'm really not happy with that. But I think there's enough solutions in the squad to avoid that, where I think Van der Ven will play a few games at left back this season because of the way we set up with our fullbacks, where one of them tucks in as a third centre back. I think Spence is really comfortable on both sides. I actually prefer him on the left side, so I think that's a factor. And then on the right side, I think Archie Gray will get a few more minutes at right back. I think the right back role in Frank's system might suit him more, where it's more of a reserved kind of narrow fullback, where he can really lead into that passing ability that he does possess. So I think there are solutions within the squad to avoid Ben Davies getting meaningful minutes while he can still be a valuable member of the squad around the training ground, etc.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that. I mean, on the point of the transfer window itself, Frank has had quite a lot to say. I'm going to combine these quotes into two because of time, Kish, and just get your thoughts on them. Firstly, Frank says there's a lot of work still to be done during this transfer window. He said, how much is going to change at this club? I'm a little bit in doubt of. But Vinay has come in, and he's clearly going to be a very important part. All the talks I've had with him, he's come across well. He's going to be integral to our success going forward. I have a good feeling that we have a good opportunity for. I don't want to just say, but just act. You know, Spurs, they won a trophy in terms of the Europa League. We are in the Champions League, but we do need to build. And as I said in that opening press conference, we are now in 2025. 6 years ago, we were able to compete in all competitions, and that is what we need to do. The competition has only now become more difficult. There's a lot of work we need to do to get up there, which I think was a fascinating quote and gives you an insight, really, that Frank is not in any way shying away from knowing that the clubs that we see at the top of the league have all improved around us. And I think I have to ask you about this quote again, Kish. We've had 24 hours to think about this since he said it. He was asked Thomas Frank directly on Johan Langer and Spurs' transfer window so far. Obviously, we are signing players here where the process at Brentford, I'm not saying they are better, but I think they were very good. I think that Johan and his team is doing a top job, but just for them to understand what I'm looking for. So that needs to be aligned. At Brentford, it was aligned. They knew what I wanted, and now I need to use more time with Johan and Rob McKenzie and these guys, and then we make those presentations. It's not, no, it's not, I need that instead. So that is just all the extra hours every day. I mean, what do you take away from these quotes, Kish? You know, an acknowledgement there's a lot of work to be done. Also an acknowledgement that you'd say the processes at the moment in place at Tottenham aren't as what they were at Brentford. Is that a fair analysis from those words there from Thomas Frank?
Yeah, I think what goes under the radar a little bit is Thomas Frank was at Brentford for 7 years, so he was given complete trust by the board, kind of involved as much as he wanted to be, probably not as involved as he needed to be towards the end because there was such a perfect idea of what he wanted, and they probably communicated so well between the recruitment staff and the coaching staff that kind of process became pretty seamless. I think transfer windows are crazy times anyway. When you're new in a job, you're coming and you're working these new processes with people you've never worked with, and I think there's always going to be teething issues. I think Frank probably wants to work with what he was told was probably a very data heavy system, and I think potentially there's been some break in kind of communication there where it's probably what he was expecting it to be like at Brentford, and it probably hasn't been quite that. I think part of that makes me think that a lot of these transfer deals we've been doing have been very opportunistic, and that's definitely not a data model. I mean, data models are about kind of finding who sticks out in the data and then going down a list of targets and choosing who perfectly suits. And it doesn't seem like we've done that this summer. That might be partly because Levy's been involved still heavily on the football side of things, and Frank would probably want it to be a complete data kind of led thing, and not have those kind of deals done over what's available, what's kind of a good deal for the market. You need to actually specify what kind of player you want, what kind of attributes you want, and then go after players. Not about, oh, this player is really a good deal, it's 60 million, he should be worth 80 million, let's go and do it, even though it might not be the perfect fit. So I think that could potentially be the potential breakdown in communication. But I think those things should clean themselves up, especially with Vinay coming in, and then also Thomas Frank being very firm and clear on what he wants and what's required to kind of build that squad. In terms of the first comments around kind of getting back to the 2019 point, I don't have any problem with those comments. I think I agree with them. I think we haven't been anywhere near as good as we were under Pochettino, and not even that 2019 team, because that was kind of hanging on that team to kind of, obviously we made the Champions League final, but we were towards the end of the cycle there. And for me, Thomas Frank in all his interviews is very open, very honest, and that is being completely honest. So if fans can't see that, then they're not being honest with themselves in my eyes, because I think there's a long way to go to get there. And him saying that isn't an issue. The players will know that. He'll know that. The board will know that. So I think obviously fans sometimes want to be led a dream and then kind of something to really believe in. And that's some managers' kind of way of galvanizing the squad, the fans, but other managers have different methods and different techniques. And that's not to say that either one works or either one doesn't. So I think that's just kind of Frank and what he's like as a person.
Yeah, he said also on the transfer window, we try to recruit players and try to get to know the team, try to get all those principles in. As an example, I was very happy with the first half against Arsenal because I think there were elements that I want to get into the team and it looked okay in sync without being completely free-flowing. But a lot of the principles, that's where the hard work needs to continue. Then as we go through the window, that's why we need to next step with the players that are going to be critical to this model. Finally, he was asked, Kish, can you ask your opinion on this? How close is the squad to being where he wants it to be? He said, I think that's difficult. I think there's no doubt that I want, how can I put this, a big enough squad, not a small squad, you know what I mean? But it needs to be able and capable enough to compete on all four fronts, because that's extremely important. I can't, though, have too many players. It's just so difficult to keep everyone happy. It's almost impossible. And then we also want to see if we can add enough quality. But again, we don't want to sign players we don't think can really improve the squad. I would rather wait to have the right talented players. I'm not here for the short-term fix. I want to build something that can last. So we need to think longer term. But of course, we do need to compete now. That's my thought process. It does feel just even in that answer, Kish, there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, kind of a backwards and forwards of responses there. He acknowledges that we need to have a robust and capable squad across 4 competitions. Then there seems to be an element of saying, well, it can't be too many players. I mean, how do you take away that final message for you there from Thomas Frank?
For me, that kind of fits into what I was saying. I think he probably wants quality over quantity. And I think quantity doesn't just mean number of players in one window, but he doesn't want to potentially buy a player out of opportunity this window, and then by next window, he's trying to phase them out already because they're not exactly what he wanted. So I think stopgap signings can be useful at times, but I think what he's really getting at there is that you don't just buy players for the sake of it just to get market opportunities. And he wants to build something proper. And to do that, you need to build methodically. You need to plan it out. There needs to be, if you see the way that Liverpool went about let's say the Van Dijk deal all those years ago, they couldn't get Van Dijk in the first window they wanted him. They didn't then go and sign a stopgap replacement for him. They waited 6 months and went and signed him. And now that's not to say that we should kind of delay our pressing needs, because Liverpool, I don't think, had a pressing need at that point. They had enough centre backs available, but they knew that to build to that kind of next point, which is challenging for leagues and challenging for Champions Leagues, they needed the perfect signing for Klopp. And Frank will have kind of the players and the type of team he wants to build long term. And he, I think, doesn't want stopgaps to kind of clog up the squad, because I think that's where you come to a point where you've got a bloated squad, which is what we have right now. There's players we can't shift, but they aren't really in the plans. And that's when things get a bit difficult to coach, a bit difficult around the training ground. You've got players who aren't getting any minutes. Their values are dropping by the day. And I think that's what he's getting at. He needs a squad that all of them are useful. He's got uses for all of them. They all have a part to play, and they're really all on board to kind of build for the future. And when we've got kind of players hanging around that are kind of in between, they don't know if they're staying, they don't know if they're going, I think that can cause a few issues and kind of affect the real progress of a team.
Yeah, totally agree. Because we're really over time here. Frank did finally say that there is no further development on the captaincy. Hasn't taken that decision yet, and that will be in due course. We're going to close, if we can, Kish, from a question from Man Bear Pig, who says, Ricky, Kish, can you give me some reason to have hope on the Savinho deal? Can you give us a reason, Kish, that we can have hope on this deal getting over the line?
I can't anymore. I've lost faith for this club. Yeah, I mean, I do think that the club would be very, very naive to not get a big-ish signing in from now until the window closing. I think they probably know the mood around the place is negative, and they know how things can turn. I think things are also very on the edge at the moment in the last couple of years, so they'll be very wary of that. So that's all the kind of hope I can give you in terms of that.
Yeah, well, listen, I do just feel out there, the optics would just look really bad now if we just don't get this deal done, because of just how much speculation there has been around the fact. And by the fact that it's been leaked now, how much the player wants to move and how much Frank wants the player. If Tottenham don't get this deal done now, listen, whilst we appreciate it's not an easy deal to do, the fact you've got the player that's wanting it, by the fact City, despite Owen Adams to want to sell the player, the fact that you've got them talking at the table, it feels now, with Tottenham returning for a bid, I just think they have to get that deal done. Kish, you've been brilliant. It's fantastic to have you back on again. Where can everybody find the wonderful work you're doing? Where can they find the breakdowns? Please let the audience know, please.
Yeah, so we're on YouTube at the moment, doing 2 or 3 videos a week, mainly kind of tactical breakdowns. We'll probably have 1 breakdown per week on a match that we play, and then 1 extra breakdown on a specific player or thing I've noticed. We're also on Twitter at Lily White Lab, but on TikTok as well, at Lily White Lab. We've also got a podcast that's going to be coming out shortly, which is me and a few co-hosts. So that will be in the works and probably, I think, coming this week. So look out for that as well.
Brilliant. Listen, you'll find all that in our episode description. And look, a polite reminder, guys, admin here. We've tried to bring you all the transfer news, but a reminder, we are delighted on Last One on Spurs to be up for the Football Content Awards of 2025. You can help us bring another trophy home to the Spurs family. If you can hit that QR code for us, for over the 12,500 watching the show live right now, for those on the playback, if you can vote for us, we greatly appreciate it. But for me, listen, and the wonderful Kish, we've been the Last One on Spurs. Keep safe, keep well. Spurs, do what you need to do and make Savinho a Tottenham player from us all. Keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you Spurs.